the countries like the US, like the UK, like Canada, Australia, those countries that operate with their own, we could say, sovereign currency. That is, they don't have a currency that's tethered to gold or anything else that's finite, any other country's currency. They have a degree of freedom when it comes to using their fiscal and monetary policies, their central banks and their parliament or their Congress, and that their governments are able to do things that other countries that don't have these sovereign currencies can't do. And when we fail to recognize that, we start talking about government as being like a household or like a business or running out of money or being unable to afford certain things. And so that's really kind of the key starting point with MMT, is recognizing that the federal government in the United States is not revenue constrained like a household or a business. And so the rules of the game are just very different once you make that basic recognition. Then everything else sort of follows from there.
Why do you think that the folks who are on Capitol Hill who complain that there's not enough money for Medicare for all or for free college or any of these social programs, why do you think that they can't acknowledge that there are no constraints?
I think they're afraid of what it might mean if they say, okay, it's not about affordability, it's about political will. And I think they're afraid of voters and what voters might demand if politicians were to sort of be candid with them and say, actually, when we draw up a budget, it's up to us to decide where and how many resources to put in. And if we really want to put more resources into education or infrastructure or Social Security, we can do that. So it sort of gives them political cover to be able to say, to treat things as if we are on a gold standard, and that money is scarce and finite and that you can run out of it and there's only so much of it. And then you get comments like, the kind that Obama made, quite frankly, when he talked about shared sacrifice and tightening the belts and, that sort of a language. So it provides a little bit of cover for policymakers who I think are a little bit worried about exactly how much the public might demand of their government if they understood that a lot more is affordable than they're told.
So correct me if I'm wrong, just to make this very clear. Yeah. Our monetary system, our currency, is essentially a social construct.
Right.
I mean, I think we kind of have to take that in for a second.
So, well, look, if I sometimes do this with audiences, and most of my audiences are really conservative. There are a lot of times I speak to big audiences in the finance community, and these are people who, their livelihoods are made by telling their clients to spend less, save more, and pay off your debt. And that's great advice for the people whose money they manage, and that's good advice for their clients. But they think that carries over to the economy as a whole. So they think that what they tell their clients is also good for the federal government and so forth. So sometimes I'll tell my audiences, don't take it from Kelton. Let's hear what Alan Greenspan has to say. So then that way it's not me trying to persuade them of something. I'm putting up, an authority, the former chair of the Federal Reserve, and I show a little video clip. And it's Alan Greenspan under oath sitting with Congressman Paul Ryan. Wow. And Paul Ryan is pressing Greenspan on this question of Social Security and its affordability. And he's saying, don't you agree with me, Mr. Chairman, that, Social Security is going broke. We can't afford it the way it's set up today. Now is the time to begin to move toward a system of personal retirement accounts. He keeps saying personal retirement accounts. You and I know what he means. He means privatizing Social Security. And he's trying to reel Greenspan in by saying, don't you agree that the system is unaffordable? We can't keep it up. We've got to change things.
So having personal retirement accounts is another way of making a future retiree benefits more secure for their retirement. And also, do you believe that personal retirement accounts as a component to a system of solvency does help improve solvency? Because when you have a personal retirement account policy, it's accompanied with a benefit offset. With that feature in place, do you believe that personal retirement accounts can help us achieve solvency for the system and make those future retiree benefits more secure?
Well, I wouldn't say that the pay-as-you-go benefits are insecure in the sense that there's nothing to prevent the federal government from creating as much money as it wants and paying it to somebody. The question is, how do you set up a system which assures that the real assets are created, which those benefits are employed to purchase. So it's not a question of security. It's a question of the structure of a financial system which assures that the real resources are created for retirement as distinct from the cash. The cash itself is nice to have, but it's got to be in the context of the real resources being created at the time those benefits are paid, so that you can purchase real resources with the benefits, which of course are cash.
Mm-hmm.
And to Greenspan's credit, he leans into the microphone and he tells the truth. And he's under oath, and he says, and I'll quote Greenspan here because I've seen this video so many times I can do it by heart. He says, "I wouldn't say that there's anything unsustainable with the way the system is set up today. There's nothing to prevent the federal government from creating as much money as it wants and paying it to someone." Oh, whoa, right? So he's taken, and you got to see the video because Paul Ryan's face just goes, I mean, the color just washes right out. And so Greenspan has taken the affordability question off the table. It's not about the money, he says. And then he goes on to make what's the really important point. He says the question is, how do you set up a system which assures that the real assets are created, that those benefits are employed to purchase? And what he's trying to say in his Greenspan way is that we have demographic changes taking place in the U.S., and we have had them taking place for decades. Mm-hmm. Boomers are moving out of the workforce and into retirement in large numbers. They're going to stop paying into the Social Security system, but they're owed benefits when they retire. The question Greenspan is pointing to is, how can we make sure that when they leave the workforce and we have fewer and fewer workers left behind to produce the stuff, that we're able to safely send out those benefit checks to future retirees, their dependents, and the disabled, and they will be able to spend that money into an economy that is productive enough that you don't get an inflation problem. Mm-hmm. And that's the bottom line. When it comes down to all of these questions about whether deficits are too big, whether the debt is a danger or something, it always comes back to inflation. And that's what Greenspan was trying to say. There's nothing to prevent us from making the payments. We owe dollars. Where else could the U.S. dollar come from? The U.S. government has a monopoly, right? Only the United States government can issue the U.S. dollar. So if the government has payments due in U.S. dollars, whether they're to Social Security retirees or bondholders or any vendor, anybody else, if they owe dollars, they can always pay the dollars. That was Greenspan's point. The question is, will it drive up inflation?